Hello and welcome to this Tuts Plus series Tumblr Theming 101. In this video we're going to continue writing the CSS for our post types. Now this is probably going to be another long video, so grab a cup of tea or something first before we start. Now before we go into writing our CSS, it's worth mentioning that Tumblr has had a refresh of its UI. They've also added a couple of features to the customize area that are worth a mention. Now the first is under the edit HTML, so the built-in HTML editor. You can now resize this pane. So this may make writing themes in the built-in HTML editor a little bit easier. The editor now has a couple of options. So you can do find and replace, go to line, and line wrap, like you would do in your text editor of choice. There is also a link to the theme documentation, which you have seen, and then there's a link to the static file uploader. Now we'll cover the static file uploader in a future video, but just for reference, Tumblr allows you to upload theme related content to its content delivery network, so that anything that's related to a theme is all served from one place, which is kind of neat. Now the second option that's worth mentioning is underneath the advanced options, and it's called preview. So currently we've been using the sample post or the dummy posts to get an idea of how each of the Tumblr post types are going to look. So we have our photo here, link, chat, audio, etc, etc. However, you may not want to create a theme that supports all of the Tumblr post types. So for example, you may want to create a theme that just concentrates on the photo post type and maybe create like an inspiration wall. What you're now able to do is you're now able to actually use your own content from your Tumblr blog. So for example of the inspiration wall, my Tumblr blog would just have all my images as multiple photo post types. And then I would use my posts as my preview here, and I would just get all them images back. So then I could go along and code up my photo specific Tumblr theme. Now, it's worth mentioning at the same time that if you want to submit a theme to the theme garden, be it free or premium, one of the conditions is that you support all of the post types. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's great if you want to create a specific theme, but just bear in mind that if you are going to actually release this theme on the theme garden, you will need to support all of the post types. So that's the changes to the customize area done. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to quickly go over our CSS, have a quick refresh. So again, this little block up here is just colors for reference. This is our reset. Typography, which we're going to expand on. Base layout. I've then split the post-based properties or declarations into two sections. This is for general. So we'll just do general, like so. And then this is for specifics. So the CSS I see here, I would consider to be the same for each of our post types. The CSS we're writing here, I'll just remove that chain in selector, is specific. So for example, when we wrote this audio Tumblr audio player, this only ever applies to the audio player in an audio post. And then finally, we've got the media queries down here. This is starting my base media query. Now again, just to reiterate, I personally like to use a 0pix media query to set up any properties I feel will change as the screen gets wider. Now, this is a good place to start. I don't feel the post footer or the post is going to change width at any point. The post footer will always be 100% width of the post, and the post will always be 100% width of the main. So I'm going to remove this, I'm going to remove that, and I'm just going to write them up here. So the post will always be 100% width of the main, and then the post footer will always be a 100% width of the post. Now, again, this is just preference, but I personally like just to quickly scroll down to this media query and I can go, right, okay, so the padding is likely to change on the post, the main element is likely to change width, and the aside element is likely to change width. So that's the reason I've done it like that. Finally, I'm going to remove this width here as well. Now, at the moment, we've set the width of the footer UL. Now, the footer UL contains the date, the notes, and the tags to 75%. Now, this looks fine when the screen is this wide, but when the screen starts off at a smaller size, as you can see, it floats underneath these two buttons, which isn't the desired effect. Now, to resolve this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of box sizing border box. Now, I'm not 100% sure on the correct definition of box sizing, but here's my understanding. When you have a element that has a width on it, so for instance, we have a div that has a width of 200 pixels, and then we add a property of padding of say 10 pixels, the width of that element would then be width plus padding. So if we set our padding up to be 10 pixels and we set the width up to be 200 pixels, the actual width of that element would be 220 pixels. So that's 10 pixels on the left for padding, the width of 200, and then 10 pixels on the right for padding, so 220 pixels. However, if you change the box sizing to border box, this padding is actually included in the width. So again, with the same example, if we use padding 10 pixels and width 200 pixels, the actual width when we have box sizing set to border box would still be 200, and the padding is then included on the inside. So we would have 10 pixels padding, 180 pixels of free space, and then 10 pixels padding on the right hand side. So as I said, I'm going to take advantage of that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that this footer UL should have a width of 100%. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some padding right on it. Padding left on it even. And I'm going to make that padding the same width of these two buttons here. So the white button and the reblog button. Now we just go to the layout, we will find out how big these are. So the light button is 20 pixels wide with 10 pixels on the left, so that's 30. And again, the reblog button is 20 and 10, so that's 30. So we have a total of 60 pixels that these two buttons take up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 60 pixels padding to the left hand side. Like so. Now the next thing I want to do is I want these two buttons to actually sit in this padding area or sit on top of this padding area. So I'm going to use position absolute to pull these buttons out of the flow and place them on top of this padding area. So what you'll need to do is you'll need to put position relative on the footer because that's where I want any position absolute elements to be relative to, like so. And then go down to the buttons and just add in position absolute, like so. Then finally, I'm going to put top 3 pixels. Now the reason I'm doing top 3 pixels is to mimic this 3 pixel margin here, and then I'm going to delete these two properties. Finally, we need to set a left. So on the light button, I'm going to set left 0 pixels. Now the reason for that is that I want the light button to be on the far left hand side of the footer. And again, I'm going to set left 30 pixels on the reblog button. Now again, the reason for the 30 pixels is because the light button I would like to emulate a 30 pixel space, 20 for the size and 10 for the margin. I'm going to click save. I'm just going to refresh that. Okay, so as you can see visually at the moment there's no difference. However, if we resize the screen, this doesn't flow underneath this anymore. Now, obviously this doesn't flow underneath this anymore because these two buttons have been taken out of the flow. Not to go into too much detail, but if you use position absolute, you're essentially taking the element out of the flow of the document, so there is no collision here. However, there is a reason for using padding. I'll just show you now. If we look here, you can see where the purple area is. Them two buttons now sit on top of the padding. And the nice thing about this is if for some reason somebody adds a lot of tags, now bear in mind that this Tumblr theme is going to be used by a wide variety of people, and you don't know how many tags somebody's actually going to use. So let's just mock up a lot of tags. Okay, now you can see that these tags never run underneath these buttons, and that's because of the padding we set on the UL, like so. So the blue area is the only available space for them tags to run into. So it's a nice little clean way of just making sure that this overflow doesn't happen. So that is now the footer fixed. As you can see, everything lines up no matter how many tags they have. Now, the one thing we are missing from the footer itself is the notes. Now, because this is a relatively new blog, and because no one's actually visited it before, we don't have a note count. Now, remember, a note count consists of how many people have liked a post and how many people have reblogged a post. So it's a combination of two values. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to use Firebug again, and I'm just going to emulate almost this. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy that, paste that underneath, and I'm going to change the class to note count, because that's what we set in the CSS. I mean in the markup and the CSS. And then we're just going to change this to make it look like we're popular. Like so. So as you can see now, we have the note count, we have the date, we have the note count, we have our tags. However, we go back to the design, the date and the note should be on the same line. So let's go back into Firebug very quickly. Let's have a look what we've got. So at the moment for our date and our note count elements, we're only doing width auto. So I'm going to remove that, add a new property, and I'm going to do display inline block. And as you can see now, they're both in the same line. However, they've moved from the right to the left. So what you need to do is then set text align right on the UL, the parent, and you can see they've gone back over just as we wanted to. So then write them styles in your CSS. Now you could do this the other way. I'm just going to change the flow here to left because it makes no sense being right. So you could do this the other way, and you could use float right. However, you would need to change the order of your markup. Because note count would be the furthest right element, you would actually have to go note count, date, then tags. Again, it's just preference, but I kind of like this way because I don't need to mess around with the markup. So here's the date and the note count, and we're just going to go here and put in display inline block, like so. Now, the final thing we need to do is, as you can see, there's a little bullet point divider between these two. So if we just inspect again with Firebug, what I want to happen here is I only want the bullet point if these two elements are on the page or on this have been printed by the server. So if we have a date and a note count element, then I want a bullet point, and that's the only condition. Now the easiest way to do this is just do post footer date plus note count. So what we're specifying here is that there must be an element with the class of date plus an element right after it with the class of note count, and then we can do something to the note count. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the content again, and I'm just going to add in a bullet point. So I'm just going to get the CSS code for that. Okay, so there's the bullet, and the CSS code for bullet is this one here. I'm going to put this in like so. And then I'm just going to add in a little margin. And add in the font size as well. The one other thing I've noticed very clearly is excuse me. One thing I've noticed very quickly is that this font here is actually different to the font we have on the design or the live site. So it looks like we need to copy them properties as well. So if you go back to your heading declaration, there we go. I'll take that and just put it on the UL like so. And then click save. Just refresh that. Okay, now the first thing I noticed straight away is that the actual font weight looks too bold. So I'm just going to go back into Photoshop. As you can see, it should actually be regular, so that would be 400. So change that to 400. Again, anywhere else you're using the Monserrati font, change that to 400 and save it. And also you'll need to change the value here in the Google Fonts link. Okay, now obviously because we're changing the HTML, we need to paste this back in like so. And then click save. So hopefully all being well, if we refresh now, sometimes the Tumblr server takes a little while to update. Again, the way you can double check that is to check in the head and see what you're actually requesting. So yeah, you can see there it's still 700. Let's go there. And there we go, there's the lighter font now, or the lower font weight even. So again with Bible, because we haven't got the note count, let's just fake it. I'm not going to bother setting the text to it, I'm just going to add in the class. Okay. Right, okay, so what we've got to do there is we just forgot to put a before or after. I'm going to do it on the after like so. Oh, sorry, on the before even, like so. And then just work on the spacing. So 0 and then say 1 pixel. Just pump that up. So 4 and 1. So again, go back to your CSS. Look for this. Do before 4, 0, and then 1 pixels. So it's 4 on the right and then 1 pixel on the left. And then click save. And that hopefully should be your note count taken care of. Again, sadly, because we haven't got a note count, I'm just going to fake it. Like so. And there you have it. So there's the note count there. That's our date, and there's our little divider. And also you'll notice that there isn't a little bullet point divider on the date here. And just to double check, change this class to note count, like so. And as you can see, there's no bullet point added. So what we're basically saying here is that only if we have these two elements on the same line do we want to add a divider. Now, the reason you do it, that I've done it this way, is because the user may not want to show the date, or the user may not want to show the note count. So again, it's just thinking on that when we start adding customization options to the theme, we've already wrote the CSS that combats any option. Always remember that if you create a theme with options, there is going to be a variety of configurations that a user is going to set up, and you'll have to forethink these, so to speak. So that's the photo taken care of. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the design. I'm going to start from the top, and I'm just going to put in the remaining styles. So the first on the design is the photo, and as you can see, the photo on the live site, the photo post type, it's missing a border radius and it's missing some margin. So I'm just going to state a general image rule, because I would like all images used on this theme to have a border radius. And then again, set max width to 100% because it's responsive. It says a border radius. Now the final thing I want to do is I want to create a rule specific to the photo. Like so, and then image first child. Again, I'm just using first child for the easiness. You could, however, put a class on the image, like so, and then style that class. So I'm going to say margin bottom 23 pixels to follow our line height. To follow our line height, keep vertical ribbing. And also I'm going to have to float this left to get rid of white space. And click save. And there we go. So there is our spacing, or our margin even, and as you can see it looks pretty much like the design. So on to the next one. So the next post type in the design is the text post type. And as you can see, we're not far off the design. A couple of things that we're missing are the bullet points on the ordered list. Also, I think there is a thicker border on the block quote. And then obviously this big title. So what I'm going to do here first is I'm actually going to set up some more general rules for our headings. We'll do this in the base typography. So do H1. Now the reason I want to do it up here is because I want this to be inherited all the way through rather than being specific and putting it in the post type. The thing with content on Tumblr is don't presume, so support everything. So for instance, each of the post types you're allowed to write some content, and that content is styled via either Markdown or the built-in rich text editor. So you can set headings on pretty much all content you write for a Tumblr post. It doesn't have to be a text post, it can be a video post, etc. So if you write your styles generic like this up the top, then they can get applied. And then obviously if you do something more specific, just override them. So I'm going to use the H5 as my starting, and this will match my body. So I'm going to make my H6 a couple of pixels smaller, do it 11. I'll do this one as 18. So there's a difference of 3 there, difference of 4 there, what a difference of 5 here. Okay, so my scale here is just difference here is 3, difference here is 4, difference here is 5, difference here is 6, and difference here is 7. It's kind of a loose way of doing it, but it should be good enough. Now, the only thing I need to adjust is the line height for anything that's bigger than 23 pixels. Remember, that's the line height of the body. So this one should be fine, but these two will need an adjustment. Now again, the way that I've worked out the unit list line height is as follows. You do the value in pixels of line height, so 23, and then divide it by the font size, 14, which gives us this value here, so 164285. So for these two, what I'm going to do is I'm going to double up the line height because it's bigger than the 23 pixels. So I'm going to do 46, and I'm going to divide it by 29, and that gives us a line height of 1.58. Now again, it doesn't need to be precise, you round it to whatever you feel is best. I'm going to just do it like that. And then again, just do the same with the H1. So 46 divided by 36. And we want a line height here of 1.2777. I'll throw in an 8 there, like so, because there's 7 recurring. And then click save. So if we refresh, the final thing to do even is add a margin bottom, and again follow the line height. And the reason I'm following the line height is just to try and keep some vertical rhythm, even though the adding images etc. is probably going to knock that out. So we go back to the design, and as you can see now, we're actually looking pretty close to what we've got on the design. So the next thing to do is to style the ULs. So again, we're going to make this a general rule. Now my reset CSS is actually avoiding list style, so I'm going to take that out. And because I've already defined a line out on the body, I'm going to take that as well. And then click save. Then just refresh, and I should have some list styles coming up. There we go. Now, making colored bullet points is a bit of a pain. So for simplicity, I'm going to keep them the same color as the text. However, I am going to nudge them so that they actually follow the same spacing, as you can see here, as the quote, or the block quote even. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to, like so, and I'm going to add padding onto the li, like so, and then save. Now what I'm going to do now is just use Firebug, and I'm just going to eyeball it. I think sometimes you do just need to eyeball things. So there we go. So reduce that so the bullet points start. And again, use the world's greatest ruler. Just reduce them values. So I'm going to make that 16, I think. And then on the li, I'm going to just make sure that these two line up. Okay, so that's pretty close. So again, the values are now 16 on the right and 8 on the right for the li. So just change that. Like so. Now again, because we don't have an OL in the example, I'm just going to use Firebug. Now this is a really nice way just to quickly get the content you want without having to add it. So that's how our OL is looking at the moment. So okay, and again, just to do the same as we did with the UL, so I'm going to do 20 on that side, and then again, use the world's greatest ruler, eyeball it, do whatever you feel is comfortable. So we're going to do, on the OL, we're going to do padding right of 20, and then we're going to do 3 pixels padding on the LI for that one. So and then again on the li. Like so, save, and then refresh. And there we have it. So again, that's starting to now look like the design. It's worth mentioning that if you were to do, or you really wanted these bullet points to be a different color, I think the cleanest way to doing it is to use the before and after. However, you'll run into an issue where you need to actually reset the before and after on every UL or LI that you then use again in the theme. So for example here, as you can see, we've now got bullet points. We've got a bullet point on this bottom one. So what we need to do is we need to go to the UL we've already written, list style none. Now we don't need to change the padding because we're already overriding that with this declaration here, or this property here. And then what we need to do is just need to add padding 0, like so. And I think that's the only other list we're using throughout the theme. And there we have it. Now that's the text post type taken care of. So the next one is the quote, like so. Now it's worth mentioning very quickly that because we made these heading rules top level, so to speak, the link post type is already starting to take shape, because if you remember correctly from our markup on the link, here we go, we're using a H2. So it's already inherited that style. So all we need to do really for the link is add a arrow afterwards, which we'll actually do now because we're actually mentioning it. So again, use the link, and again remember that we've stated in our HTML that we are going to include the post type as a class. So again, if we just look at the Firebug post link, so we then can style via link the link class here. And I'm just going to do, and again, I'm just going to use first child and use after and do content and then find the CSS code for an arrow, which is this one here, which is 2192. I will post a link to the two websites I'm using to get my CSS escape codes in the description for this video. So we'll just place that in like so. We'll need to just put a space there. And then if we go back to the design, hopefully, right, okay. So link, because it's H2 first. So we'll do H2 first child. Hopefully that should work. There we go. So again, let's go back to the design very quickly. It's all starting to come together very nicely. So let's just go back to the post types we missed. So next one is block. Now the block, the the quote even. The next one is quote. Now the quote post type is a little bit different because we've already styled our block quotes. We need to be very specific. So we're going to use a specific post type selector. So we're going to just do quote. And then again, I'm just going to do and again, the reason I'm using first child is because sometimes when you get a quote in the content, there is also another block quote. So we only want to make sure we're ever targeting this first block quote. Now, if we look at the design, this text here is the exact same as the text used here and the text used here. So the titles from the text post type and the link post type. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab them, which will be this one here, and the font weight and the color, like so. Click save and then just do refresh. Okay, and again we just need to snag from the H2 the font size and the line height. There we go. So we're starting to look a little bit more like the design. Now, because we're overriding the parent block quote properties, what we need to do is we need to take the border off, and then we need to take the padding off, like so. Okay, now when we originally wrote the markup for the quote post type, we added a class of length. Now, if we just go back to the documentation very quickly, length on a quote will give us either short, medium, or long, depending on the length of text or the length of the quote. Now, I'm going to use this. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to quickly copy this one. And I'm going to write 3 new rules, small, medium, and large. Now, the reason why I do this is if the quote is really, really long, I want the text size to reduce. So take these 2 out of here, put them in for small. And again, I'm just going to use the heading sizes that we've already defined. So if it's a medium, I would like the font size to be 23 pixels. And then if it's a large, I want it to be 18. So this follows H2, H3, H4. Just double check that. Yeah. H2, H3, H4. Like so. And then click save. Now obviously this won't make much of a difference at the moment. However, if you go back in, sorry, I got the wrong word there. It's short, not small. Short. Okay. Short, not small. So if we go back in. Okay, so that's gone back up to short. So if we change this now to medium, and then we do large, we won't see a difference, apparently. Let's just see what's going on here. Short, medium, and long, right. Should probably check the documentation a little bit more before I do these examples. So if we just refresh this now. Okay, so as you can see now, that's for a long one, and that's for a medium one. And again, if you just want to double check that, just copy it, paste it in, and that's how a medium would look. And again, if you want to take that text and just paste it in, okay, and change that class to say long, that is how a long quote would look. So again, you're not going to have massive text size if the text is really long. That's a nice little feature that Tumblr have added in for block quotes. Now the final thing to do with a block quote is to add in the quotes, like so. So again, I'm just going to use before and after. Use content again. And I'm going to make one general rule for both the before and after, which will contain the color. As you can see, I don't really use Photoshop that often. So the color for that is CCC. Like so, and then just go back to the CSS escape code and find the quote marks. So we'll use this one for before, and then we'll use this one for after. Like so, and then just click save. And now we have our quote marks. Like so. And again, if you want to make any adjustments, etc., for some reason Tumblr automatically puts in some spacing. Again, just check your markup to see if you're doing anything. So I presume if we just change the markup to that, we'll probably eliminate the white space. So again, any changes that you make to the HTML, remember to upload, to add them into the built-in HTML editor, and then click Save. Okay, so it doesn't seem to be an issue with a markup, it just seems to be something that Tumblr does. However, if you look at the design, I'm quite happy with that. I don't think they're actually too far off, so I'm going to leave them as they are. So that's now the quote taken care of. And looking through, the only thing really we have left to style on the post types is the chat post type, which we'll do now. And then we'll wrap this video up and everyone can have a little bit of a break before you come back and finish up the final media queries. So again, because the chat uses a list, an ordered list, we need to be specific with our CSS to the post type. So I'm just going to remove them too because we're not using them. And then I'm just going to add in one that says chat, or a CSS class even, sorry, a class that says chat. And then again, OL first child. Now again, it depends on what browsers you're supporting. If you're going to support browsers that don't support CSS free selectors or first child, etc., then feel free to add a class in your markup here. So you just do class and then something like dialog or something like that. But for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just going to keep it nice and modern. So the first things we need to do is do list style none, and then padding 0, and then again remember we'll also have to reset the padding on the li. Like so, and then take the padding off that one. And click save, and hopefully. Okay, so we're getting there. Now, if we go to the design, the first thing you notice is that this text is different to this text. So if we go back to our markup, what we decided to use is a span around the names. So again, now you can just use span rather than li span, and then again just snag the heading font properties. So Montserrat and the font weight of 400. Add them in there. Click save. And refresh. Now, the one benefit of creating a Tumblr theme, I suppose, is that you'll get used to set Control S, Control R, Control V, and Control C. So as you can see now, we're using the correct font. Now, again, in our markup, what we decided to do is we decided to use the variable called alt, which will print out odd or even for each line of the chat, and we can just confirm this by looking at the markup. So as you can see, here's our OL, here's our chat post, and here's odd, even, odd, even, odd, even. And if we look at the design, odd is a light orange, even is a dark orange. So we'll go to our CSS and just double check the design again. The one thing you'll notice is the text never actually changes color, so it's all the same color. So we need to be specific to the spans. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go, just copy this quickly. I'm going to do chat, OL first child, and then just before that put in odd. And again, same for even. Like so. Okay, let's just see if we've got these up. Right, so these are the two colours we want to use. So highlight is for odd, which is that bright orange colour. Like so, and then highlight out is for the dark orange colour. Like so. Just give that a refresh. Now, just for clarification, when I'm actually creating a theme, I use, or when I create anything, any CSS, I use less. So what you would do here is you just declare these as variables and obviously do the includes. However, that may be for another day. So you can see now we've got the colors. And the only thing we really need to do now is set a minimum width here, like so. And then we need to set a line height. So I'm just going to go in and do it straight in Firebug and copy the properties over. So here's our span and do min width. Again, you're probably going to have to do a display or a float on this. Okay, so I'm going to do display inline block, and I'm just going to reduce this. I'm going to make it 70. Now the good thing here is if the name ever gets too big, everything else it'll expand anyway. So that's quite a nice little thing. So there's our min width and display inline. So just add that into your CSS. I'm actually going to just bump it up to 75. And again, like so. Now the only other real thing I think on here is the spacing. So we're just going to, you can do this one of two ways. You can either bump up the line height on the LIs, like so. Or you could add a margin bottom on them. So I'm probably actually just going to go with margin bottom, and again just go to Firebug. And then just add in your rule, your property even. Like so. And then just do a quick refresh. Now, the one thing I would say here is if you're going to use the margin bottom approach, is to override your margin bottom on the actual OL and adjust it for that 7 pixels, because obviously the last LI's got 7 pixels already. So just do margin bottom. So you're going to do 23 take away 7, which is 16, like so. There we have it. So again, just trying to keep the vertical rhythm going throughout. So let's just go back to the design, and let's just double check we've done the styles for all of the post types. Oh, as you can see there, that white space actually disappeared. It must have been a refresh, which is nice. So here's our photo post design. Just take the layers off. So here's our photo post design, and here's our photo post live. So as you can see, they're pretty similar. Here's our text post design, and here's our text post live. So again, you can see they're pretty similar. There seems to be a bit of a difference with the line height, but I'm quite happy to let it go. Again, as I mentioned previously in the series, if you want to make a change to the design when you're coding it, feel free. I think that's the beauty of development, especially if you're coding your own design, is you can make these little tweaks as you're going along. The PSD isn't gospel, so to speak. So that's our text post done. Go up and have a look at our quote, which we know looks pretty good. Like so. And then our chat, which we just styled. Again, that looks pretty good. So that's our rodeo post. Our rodeo post was pretty easy because we didn't actually have to do anything. Like so. Now, it's worth mentioning here on the audio post that we're actually adding a margin already to the iframe. I'm just going to reduce that down to 23 just to follow the line height again. And you can see now everything lines up a little bit better. So let's just change that rule. And again, this harks back onto what I just said. You see something, want to change it, jump into your CSS, change it, carry on. Okay, so let's have a look for our link. Again, our link looks pretty good. And then that's another text post. And then finally a video, which we don't actually have a post for at the moment. So we'll worry about that later on. So that is it for our post type styling and for this video. I would like to thank you very much for persevering with the CSS videos. They are going to be they're going to be long but very quick in terms of what we go through. So in the next video, what we'll do is we'll look to finish up the styling on this theme. We'll look at doing the footer, we'll look at doing the heading, and we'll look at adding the final bits for our media queries. And then from there on in, it's about adding options to the theme to make it customizable. So again, thank you for joining, and I hope to see you in the next one.